let's get started, shall we? Welcome everybody to CPGs and the grocery industry. I am so thrilled to be hosting this along with Teepoo Riaz, who has joined Helbraun Levey as of counsel. That just means he's a lawyer who works with us, and we've developed a very close relationship. And we're launching this CPG section of the firm together. Because why? Because I've been praying and I have been cajoling our clients to get into this business. You guys already make food, you make drinks, you make products, and you're selling them in your store, in your shop, in your restaurant, and you have to sell so much of it to make any money. And we can get you onto the shelves and you can sell it there. It's a little less difficult per item, probably, sweat per item, but it's something that we can do. Teepoo, and Alex, let's put up the slide. Teepoo comes from FreshDirect. He's a restaurant person. We met because he was one of our clients, and he was opening up a couple of restaurants in New York. And before that, he worked for a large firm. He's a lawyer. And then after that, he worked for FreshDirect. And I always thought that was really interesting that he worked for FreshDirect, which is a pretty big grocer, I'd say, these days. And we started talking about how he could get involved with our clients and really just focus on the food and beverage aspect of CPGs. So Teepoo was at FreshDirect. He helped them through the sale of FreshDirect to a big company. What was that company you sold it to, Teepoo?
Ahold Delhaize. They own
Delhaize.
Stop and Shop and Hannaford, amongst other brands on the East Coast. They are very large.
They're large, and Teepoo sold it to them as the general counsel. So he knows the grocery game really well. He knows food and beverage really well. He is one of us. He is a restaurant guy, and we're thrilled to have you. So Teepoo, let's talk CPGs and the grocery. First of all, what does CPG mean and why do they call them that?
Consumer packaged goods. That's what it is. And so thank you for that introduction. And Alex, if you want to flip the page, just one more. Oh yeah, back. Legal disclaimer. We are just providing this information. It's purely informative, not legal advice, obviously. You guys can come to us and we will work with you on that. So let's get rolling.
That was a solid legal disclaimer, Teepoo. I like that a lot.
Nice and short. I think everybody
breeze right over it.
Yeah, 100%. Super excited to be here. I'm familiar with David's clients, who he's told me, who I've eaten in many of the restaurants of David's clients. It's hard, frankly, not to. And so it's very exciting for me to be supporting a roster of phenomenal talent. And I look forward to working with you guys in the future on hopefully these endeavors. So let's dig in. And
I should say this, Teepoo. Before we launched the CPG practice, I randomly asked 10 clients, like the 10 clients who called me in a row. Hey, do you have any interest in putting something on the shelf? 9 out of the 10 people said that they did. Oh, I have a sauce, I have an oil, I have a bread, whatever it is. So that is why we started this thing, because you guys want it. And also because I want you to diversify your portfolios. I keep saying that, but we just went through COVID. We've gone through some hard times. This is a way to make some real money. So
it is. And, I think I want to level set as we kind of start this discussion and just kind of, set us up to cover a broad array of topics. But to put this in context for you and, where you're coming from, there are many beloved restaurants that have launched products that people love that have gone on to great success. And so from New York, we have 4 things in front of us right here that people really enjoy. These are things that have touched on trends that are going on, such as Chili Crunch. And these are also brands that have happened over the last 30 years. Rayo's launched in the 90s, Balthazar in the 00s, and then you have Carbone and Momofuku coming up in the aughts and more recently. And so it is always great to see huge New York City brands doing well with these products on shelves, and now you see these around the country.
And the awesome thing about it is there's no like secret. There's no secret to getting on the shelves. There's a methodology of doing it. We're going to talk about that, but there's no big secret. You got a product you like, you can get on the shelves.
Absolutely, 100%. And Alex will take us to the next slide. And so I want to set folks up for thinking about kind of really what can be the dollars involved ultimately in things that do start out quite humbly. What we have are mostly New York brands that started here, with the exception of Lily's from Colorado. And these are brands that, again, Rayo's is the oldest one here, but most of these started in the aughts. And these ultimately, they all have a different kind of, flavor. Sir Kensington's, as you recall, is kind of a premium ketchup and condiment brand. Hugh is a good for you chocolate company. Tate's, local cookies that were made with all natural ingredients at a time when that was kind of a new thing. And all of these brands have sold for an exponent of their revenues and for very large sums, from $140 million to Tate's being sold to Mondelez for $500 million. And so having success in this space can be really lucrative and can be a life-changing event.
I mean, $500 million is a life-changing event for anybody, isn't it?
It's a totally life-changing event for most people. And I think what you see here are large multinational companies, right? So these brands at the bottom that you see have a really hard time creating a halo around their brands. And so what they often do is they go into the space and see who is there that is doing it, and they buy them. It's much more difficult for someone at Unilever to think up a brand and for it to gain all that traction and goodwill in the marketplace that these have.
Yeah, not everyone has a janitor running around coming up with flaming hot Cheetos.
Exactly.
It's on Netflix now. I see it all the time.
Yep.
But when they sell for 500 million, I'm assuming at that point that the owners don't own all of it. Is that usually the case? Is they're usually like some investors to get to that point?
Yeah, and as we'll talk through the slides, you'll see that as you grow, there do come pressures for scale and to grow. And at that time, it's not uncommon for a brand to go and seek capital to help it achieve either self-production or to help go with a larger co-packer. And so I would say that it's a safe assumption that most of these folks who did sell for these numbers probably had investors involved, but probably still did very well for themselves.
Okay. Well, those are some pretty healthy numbers. And
they're very healthy numbers. They're not, they are slightly, they're different than I would say your average sale price of a restaurant. In addition, these were probably, I would say, 2 to 3x of their revenues.
Your average sale price for a restaurant is $150,000.
These are different numbers then.
All right, let's move on.
Yep. And so as David mentioned this, why do we want you guys to think about this? And I think this is, as restaurants have came out of COVID, there's been definite headwinds, but getting into food products can really grow your brand. It can extend your brand if you've got strong presence in the marketplace. You've got a head start with your consumers, strong social media accounts, strong Facebook, strong Instagram, and people love your product in your restaurant. That means they trust you and that they're willing to see you do something else that extends that. And so what that provides you is what David mentioned at the beginning, which is a diversification of your revenue streams. It allows you to bring in revenue that is not dependent on in-person dining. It's not subject to rain and snow and all these conditions that you face in your daily lives when you run a restaurant that has both in-person, outdoor seating, and all of that stuff.
There's
CPG,
no, there's no bathroom, there's no dishwasher, there's no, wait staff calling in sick. There's no 3 o'clock in the morning phone call, on and on of the things that they do not require. It's
correct. I would say that
amazing.
running a CPG business can be a much more forward-looking business as opposed to being reactive and being on the defense a lot. Here, there is a lot of forward-looking planning, which it does take time and does require it, but instead, you're looking down the road months versus showtime tonight. And so there is a big difference in that way and how it treats you as an owner. And so there are also very healthy margins in general with profit with the CPGs, and it tends to be in the 40 to 50% range for most. And why we also think you guys should consider it is that there are consumers, and we are all these people too, right? We are all consumers. Even if you own restaurants, you're still in the grocery store. We are always looking for something new, which means that there is always opportunity in the marketplace to launch something that people want. All right.
We got some quick questions right off the bat. You ready, Teepoo?
Sure, of course.
This is all grocery, ambient, stable foods. Is there an opportunity in the fresh frozen space as well?
100%, and we are going to get into that in a second. But yes, the short answer is the fresh categories in grocery stores are increasing. Yes.
And there's another question. Do you think Amazon and the direction of online ordering versus going to the stores help or hurt CPG brands?
I think they absolutely 100% help. I think being omni-channel, which is the term we use for being sold anywhere folks want to buy something, so that means in person or online, is a great opportunity. And so because that means you get to run your own website, you can do direct to consumer, you can go through Goldbelly, for example, and you can be in a store. So anywhere you can be for a consumer is what we would recommend.
Let's talk about what some of those things are on this slide.
Absolutely. So the grocery space is huge. You know, as consumers, we all recognize basically 3 tiers of stores that are available. And this is a mix of online and brick and mortar. And we're talking primarily New York. I know we may have some clients who are outside of the New York metro area, but this is focused on New York. But what we're looking at are the 3 categories of stores that provide that you, with a CPG, can be in. Right? And one category does not obviate the other. Obviously, getting into a Walmart is going to be more complicated than getting into Union Market or Citarella in the city. And so, but this is how you can start. And one, to think about the grocery space, shopping for grocery is at least a weekly activity for most people, if not more frequently. And so, on average, grocery carts are containing somewhere between 20 to 40 items per visit. So I believe on average an Amazon orders like something like 1.6 items. So it's just a very different shopping experience. People need to buy a lot of products. They buy them at once and they're doing it all the time. And so with that, you need to keep them engaged. And again, that's another reason why we say this space is always looking for new stuff.
So how does it work? Do you go for the small local ones first and then work your way up the chain?
100%. Yes. We absolutely recommend that if you are even if you weren't known, but here we have a great client base that are known, you start local and you start where your brand is known, and that's where you begin. And so for us, we would be recommending the right-hand column, which is our local New York markets, in addition to the mid-regional, where you see there, which is brands we all know and we all know in the area, that we would start with. And then getting into things on the left side eventually comes with things like scale.
Mm-hmm.
But getting in locally makes this it makes it a process that's much easier for folks who've never done it to get their hands around it, understand it, have direct communications with these stores where sometimes it can be more challenging, for example, to talk to the folks at Kroger. Here, it's much easier to talk to the folks at Zabar's.
especially with the people that you know.
Correct.
Fantastic.
All right. And so, Alex, next slide, please. And so what we're going to do here, to the question that someone asked about fresh versus ambient, we're just giving you a pretty standard grocery store layout as we start thinking through this. And this goes directly to that question of like, should I make a shelf-stable product? I'm thinking about a product. Should it be shelf-stable, or it's just better fresh? I want to be fresh. And so as you think about a grocery store, all those aisles in the middle are called center store. Those are ambient. They are shelf-stable. And so, and then around the perimeter of the store are all your refrigerated cases, starting in produce, heading to seafood, meat, deli, dairy, freezer. And what has been increasingly happening over the last decade are people are making products that require refrigeration. An example of a product that we all know, and we probably all are buying, that is now refrigerated, that 10 years ago wasn't really around to any great degree, is hummus. You see hummus in all grocery stores now. It is taking up space that was given to probably something like a dairy item or something like that. And that is increasingly starting to happen. So in grocery stores, you will now see the end of a dry aisle with refrigerators there now holding product. So there is an increase in the demand for fresh products. Folks, on average, in an average supermarket, buy 60% shelf-stable products and 40% fresh. And that number has been static for a number of years, but it's starting to change a little bit. So as you start thinking about your product, whether it's a sauce or a condiment or something else, you can feel comfortable that you can explore either, and you can also change. There are products that have entered the marketplace that were fresh, requiring refrigeration, and once scale demanded it, they tweaked their recipes and they were made shelf-stable products. Now, Alex, you want to switch that up?
We always hear these stories about like pay to play, how to get on the shelves. When you talk to like, the guy at Pathmark, you got to slip him some cash. What's the deal?
Right. So I think folks may have heard of slotting fees and shelf fees that do exist. And these are basically fees that are paid to the grocer to get premium slotting on a grocery shelf. However, what I'm going to say is that still exists. However, it is grocer dependent, and the bigger the grocer, the more structured of an environment you're going to see regarding fees. For example, I know that FreshDirect does not take a fee for that. In addition, Wegmans, I believe, as well, does not take, for example, slotting fees. They're also primarily private label, but they operate in a different way. And I think what you're starting to see grocers where it's not a contentious relationship, if you will, between the CPG and the grocery store, but rather there's a real desire to be partners with small brands to bring to their consumers products that they really want. And that's where you see that. And I can say from my experience at FreshDirect, the merchants I knew were real advocates for the brands that they brought on. And not only were they selling the brands, but they were advocating for these brands to succeed. And so I think that's where you see it. And there is a recognition that, with the slotting fees and all the fees that can add up, you start hurting the margin that we just talked about. And so I think in general, what you'll see, it's going to be across the board varied. And I think it really is case by case dependent in that area.
When you get somebody to take your product, do you have to go and stand there with an apron and set up a display and hawk the product? Because I know who's on this call right now, and I know 90% of them don't want to do that. Do you have
Correct.
to?
And we'll talk about how you'll interact with the grocers in a couple slides. But I want to give folks a little bit of kind of just as we start we're going to start drilling down deeper and deeper into the products themselves. But your average grocery store in a suburban area, not New York City, is going to contain about 40,000 items. So when you close your eyes and you think about it, you're like, yep, there's going to be around 8 mustards, 15 salsas, 20 different types of tortillas. And that adds up to about 40,000 items. And on average, there's about 30,000 new food products that are entering the space annually. Competitive, but it also shows the desire that people want new stuff. It is a constantly evolving industry. It is not static. And I just mentioned that fresh products are increasingly grabbing more shelf space. So I think folks, they should have comfort if that they're making a fresh product. They should explore that first. All right. All right. As we start drilling deeper, now we're going to start thinking about what's going on in the industry and what has been happening over the last few years, probably definitely pre-pandemic, regarding food. And I'm sure we all see this in our own diets and what we buy at the grocery store ourselves, right? So what we're doing. And so consumer food trends for 2023 are basically following prior trends of the last couple of years of folks seeking out what I'm going to say are brands that have kind of a halo of goodness around them. Either they have a halo of goodness regarding how they interact with the environment, regarding being a sustainable brand, producing no CO2s, recycling everything they bring in, or they have a halo around health and how their product is going to interact with you. And so there are a couple of brands here. Lundberg Family Farms is actually a big rice family, grain producer out in California. They themselves are they're becoming a very sustainable grower. They are partnering with certified growers in their third world areas to make sure people are getting fair wages and things of that nature. Cliff and Hippies, chickpeas, and the Cliff bars are health focused. And so those things are still super popular. These trends are not going away, the desire for healthy foods or good for you foods, but in every category as well. It's good for you snacks. So people aren't saying no to chocolate, for example. And so it's taking things that have traditionally, been considered not so great for you and making a better version of it. In addition, local foods are still gaining in popularity. I think for us in New York, we have been spoiled for the last 15 years, where local and the farmers market scene here has been just so overwhelmingly great that for us, it might feel normal. But when you think about the rest of the country, local is still kind of a thing that is growing. It's still not as huge of a thing as it is in certain major metropolitan areas. So there's opportunity there. And again, people love snacks. And if there's a halo effect around snacking, even the better. So these are some of the trends that are still happening as you kind of contemplate where your product could fit in the grocery store.
Here's a question for you, Teepoo. This is from one of our clients. What if we have a killer idea? What's the process of keeping it proprietary?
Okay, so food products in general are not going to get a lot of protection when it comes to intellectual property. And so why am because most of these food products have existed previously. Unless there's some product that contains some novelty in it that is a scientifically engineered protein, for example, that has received patent protection, I think it's going to be, on average, very difficult for a product, other than regarding, for example, brand, trademark, copyright, all of those types of things that we see on this page here. The food items itself and the way those ingredients are mixed together is going to be very difficult to have protection on, especially if it's new. For example, claiming that your hummus is unique and that no one can make it, for example, like I make it, is going to be a challenge. And so
you can protect the name and you can protect your branding.
100%. And you know what? The thing that will distinguish people is how your product tastes and the quality that you bring to your product. That is what's going to distinguish you and keep you in the marketplace. And 100%, to David's point, all that IP is protected.
Right. Okay.
All right. Now we're in the nitty-gritty. David Chang is not a client. However, I thought that this photo is great photo of a person we all recognize. I'm sure some of you know him. And what's happening on this slide is that he's filling a hole, in my opinion. His products are actually, one's following a major trend, right? David did not come up with Chili Crisp, and frankly was, there were a number of brands that were in the marketplace by the time that brand surfaced. But that's definitely a trend that he's following. In addition, I would say he's filling a hole right now with his noodles, where often home dried Asian noodles were not of the greatest quality. And so he is bringing a premium product into a space that's been around for years in the grocery market, and he's filling that. And so I think he's doing a couple things really smartly, and that's what we would look to do with our clients as well. All right. And now I think a lot of folks are going to have questions that we're going to kind of go through in a methodical kind of way to talk about how this whole process starts, just where you're banging around an idea and all it is an idea, to the entire way of ultimately, thinking about an exit, and whether that is, a sale of your product ultimately, right? Which could be a great thing for you. And so we're going to talk through phase one is launch, and that's concept to market. That's the initial, getting your product initially into the market. And then phase two being market fit, where you are now getting sales, and you're getting those sales in a local area. Regional, for us, regional is kind of the New York metro up to Boston area, if you will, and then down to 95, the 95 corridor for New York. That's kind of a regional thing. And then scale. Your product has tested well. You are doing, for example, 50 Whole Foods or the 150 in the tri-state area. And they say, you know what? It's time for you to expand to all of our stores. And so, and we're going to walk through each of these phases and talk about kind of the things that you need to think about. And as you think about this, as we head forward.
So those numbers next to the different phases, Teepoo, that is sales, right? Sales.
These are the revenues, right? Exactly. So you can think about, you're selling a $10, for example, sauce, and you're generating 150K in revenue, what that means. So to just give some kind of context and tactile nature to what we're chatting about, these are revenues of where you can look, and these are obviously generalities about where you can start thinking about how your product will expand.
Let's get into launch, because our clients are always wondering, how do I get, everyone's got a product. Everyone on this call has a product, and nobody knows how to do it and how much it's going to cost. And I want you to explain it to us.
Yep. So phase one is basically concept, right? Now this is going to be concept to the initial market. And what we're talking about is choosing your first product carefully. And that is thinking about what you're bringing into the marketplace, why you're bringing it into the marketplace. If you've got yours is the best, it's not there. We're addressing a need. It's been always done really poorly, for example. Whatever the reason, it's okay, but you want to choose your first product carefully. And I think it helps to also focus on a product, not 50 products. It is an attention to detail, and it is understanding something really well, like you do in your restaurant, and bringing that forward. And then development of the product, testing and sampling of the product. Obviously, a la minute cooking of the product is not going to be the same as it will once it's been chilled down and, for example, reheated, such as like when a home consumer would use it. And what we find really great that David has with his clients is that you have a base of people who trust you, who come into your restaurants, where you can use your customers, a select group, and you can engage with them, that you're thinking about this, and talk with them and have them try it. And so this is a great way to test the market in a small way, but they're consumers. And so that's how you can start putting a little bit of rubber to the road here. And then you also want to start thinking about your brand and your packaging. Is this a direct extension of your restaurant? Or is this something that's going to be new and that's going to be independent of your restaurant branding? And then, especially for folks who are thinking about the good for you halo and that kind of area, to explore nutritional value of your product. You know, if you are thinking about, I'm really into wellness, I like wellness, I want my thing to have a health glow about it, you will want to explore your nutritional value. And you can do this online now. It's actually very easy to explore nutrition. You can input in various websites the ingredients of a product, and it will give you back your nutritional values. And so what we're talking about are all the items that are on a CPG, your carbs, your fats, your proteins, your sugars, et cetera, et
Teepoo,
cetera.
is that enough to get onto the shelf? Can I just go online and put my ingredients in and slap a label on my hot sauce and then put it on the shelf, or does it have to be more official than that?
It will need to be more official than that. We're going to get into that. But you are starting to develop a product with a look and feel and having some idea about your nutrition now. And so now you're going to have something real to take to the stores. And it's going to have to look pretty darn close to what you want on the shelf, because you're going to need, merchants don't have vision. And so what you're going to take to the stores, what you're going to want them to sell, you know?
So you're just showing them a demo.
No,
You're gonna have to button it up a little bit.
Yeah, it doesn't have to, right. It can be a demo, but it's going to have to be a really good demo. And so
Okay.
we'll get into that a little bit while we're talking about that. You don't get to show up with a pint container containing a sauce with no info. Let me just put it that way. So let's dig into the second slide here, Alex. And I think this is, an important aspect for that what we wanted to bring up is that this is a business, and the development of this is going to be most likely independent of the restaurant ultimately. And it does take thoughtful planning to launch this. And so we are recommending a business plan to start this and how to envision your company. And we can also help you with the writing of a business plan and to help you go from concept to document, to how to think about this. And this would include, and so just to think of, what are we talking about with a business plan? We are talking about R&D costs, your product development and testing, startup costs. Are you going to have personnel? Are you going to rent space? Are you going to initially use your restaurant to do this? Are you going to get what is called a co-packer, which is known as contract packaging, where you retain a third-party manufacturer to make your product for you per your specification? And then a good idea, and just as a business plan is always a projection, right? A business plan is being done in advance of the business. Projections for 3 years, operating expenses for 3 years, competitor analysis. Who is in your space? Are you doing something novel? Are you doing something where there's a ton of people doing it? And marketing, and then ultimately an exit strategy. And these are things that are there to help stabilize you and your thought process, and to give you context and how you think about how you're going forward. But at times, sometimes it may not be surprising where you may have a merchant or an investor or somebody who might say, do you guys have a business plan? And so we think it's a really, really important aspect to have as you start this process, and it can absolutely be done in parallel as you develop your product.
You got to do it. I mean, most of us don't write business plans for every restaurant we're going to open. We did maybe for the first one, and then we're like, we know how to do this. This is different. We need to see how many hot sauces we need to sell to make $250,000 a year, for example, if that's your goal. And then you have to see how possible that is. And most of us don't know those numbers yet. We do, me and Teepoo do. We can help you figure it out, but you can't skip this step for this.
Yeah, I think it's super important. It also helps you provide your capital needs, as we'll talk later, how this will require some capital, and it's going to be, can I do it myself, or what? I need to look for investors or somebody else. So yeah, essential, and we're here to help with that. Super. So I think what's really important for folks to understand is that you don't have to go out and make $200,000 worth of a sauce, stick it in containers, and pray that it's going to get picked up by a grocery store before it all goes bad. Okay, so there isn't so that I think is important to realize. In lieu of that, the way to tackle this, and we've mentioned some of these aspects, is that you're now down the road, you have a product, there's a product that you've shown to us that we're like, yeah, this is a great product. And now we're going to test the market. And what this means is, again, 100% it means to start locally, where you are known, where your customer base for the restaurant already is located, and start where you are known. And this is where you're going to create, and this is part of the business plan, but these are just various aspects that are going to come out of the business plan. And so you're going to create a sell sheet that you can take to the stores. And what that means, it's going to contain your price. It's going to contain your case size. It's going to contain your nutrition. It's going to provide the margins both for yourself and for the retailer. And that's going to have, it's going to contain all the information on a single sheet of paper that a merchant can look at and digest everything that they need to know, including how big is the case size. Grocery stores stock items by the case, and they'll need to know how big it is. I can tell you, for example, at FreshDirect, the binning process of products and how they arrive was down to the inch. And so everything was looked at. If it was a dozen bottles in a box, what was the dimension of that box? So they understood that they could fit it in, you know, and it's just the basic information that a grocer is going to need, because they have so many, again, 40,000 items are coming into their store on a regular basis. They need to make sure it fits. And then you get to produce a sample. You're going to produce a sample with your packaging, nutrition, your sell sheet. And at that point, introduction of your product to retailers, merchants, and the industry can begin. Okay, and what I mean by the industry, there are trade shows. There's a trade show coming up next week. Actually, the Fancy Food Show at the Javits Center is the largest trade show of food CPG products that happens here. It happens here in June, and it'll happen in Las Vegas in the winter. And so at that point, when you have all of these items together, you can then go to start meeting folks. And for example, you will receive feedback about what they're going to need from you. And there are grocers now who are going to give you positive feedback regarding, this is a great product. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And so you can start getting that feedback and you can adjust as needed. And this is this is testing the market. There's also you can go to market direct to consumer as well. You can build a website that ships via Shopify and third parties that will ship out directly to consumers. If you see a lot of brands these days, a lot of food brands allow you to buy direct from them, you know, and you can go visit them and buy direct in lieu of going to a store. And so,
Teepoo, what's the deal with the Fancy Food Show? I know it's at the Javits Center. I've been there too many times. When I go down the elevator into the Javits Convention Hall, I start to immediately fall asleep. Who's there? Are these CPG companies trying to attract grocers? Who are they trying to attract, and why are they displaying their goods at the Fancy Food Show?
they're trying, yes. So you're either attracting representation, grocers, distributors, also investment. And so that is who is there at these shows. You as a vendor can rent space and you can have your product there and it will be shown, and everybody goes, the entire industry goes. So all major grocers are there, small grocers are there, venture capital firms are there, incubators, food incubators are there. And so it's just kind of, you know, it's one of those areas where it's a one-stop shop. It's like the pizza expo for those in the pizza industry, right? It is the one-stop shop where folks from around the country come for 4 days and you have a chance to meet a ton of people, make a ton of connections too. It's a networking event as well, and get your product out there in a probably the most concentrated way that, you know, that I know of.
It's interesting. So maybe next year we'll have a Helbraun Levey booth where all of our clients can put their products out.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. It's a great thing. And anyone can buy a ticket too and go. Yeah. I mean, it gets a ton of people who just go and eat for 4 days. All right. And so phases 3 and 4, once you have gotten into the marketplace, and this is either through retailers, direct to consumer, you're there yourself, you're working with grocers, expansion expansion happens. The need of your product is growing. Demand is growing. More people want it. A grocer has chosen to sell you in more stores. And so being able to meet this demand, I think, is extremely important. I think in my experience, when a brand was unable to either deliver or meet the capacity, that is where small brands ran into trouble, where the grocers would be hesitant to carry them. Nobody likes to carry brands that they don't know are going to show up. And so the ability to grow and to scale eventually is really important. And grocers will help with that too. Like nobody, again, I think the dynamic has stabilized very much between brands and grocers now. Like there's a desire to partner and for these brands to be successful and to do well, because the store does well too. And so as a brand grows, there are ways, things that the company's going to have to think about, how and where you're manufacturing. And so the two ways people manufacture the products, you can self-produce. So that means either in a very limited way in New York City, you can actually produce and sell your products in your restaurant out to the public. However, there's a lot of restrictions with that, including the dollar amount of sale that can happen before your regulatory requirements change, and you would have to move out to a proper commercial kitchen that has a certain safety protocols that are required. And so, but on the flip side of that self-production is also renting your own commercial kitchen, in addition to hiring your own personnel to package and label your product. And that is very costly because that requires people and real estate. And so where a lot of folks in the CPG space end up in is in the co-packing space. And that is contract packaging. That is working with a third party to produce your product to your specification, who will then package it, label it for you, box it, and get it out to the retailers for you. And of course, there's a price for that. But in exchange for that price, they take care, they have facilities that meet both FDA and sometimes USDA requirements. If you're dealing in meat in your product, for example, they know nutrition, they know the labeling laws. And so there is an element that they provide that can make life a lot easier. Contract co-packers come in all shapes and sizes. In New York City, we are very fortunate that there are contract packagers that are small. They're in New York City. They will handle low volumes of a new company. And then in addition, we have ones in the surrounding area that can handle tens of thousands of cases. And as you go up the chain on size, you can move from contract packager to contract packager. And so that for most folks is where we're going to recommend that we should be exploring the actual manufacturing of your product is with a co-packer.
Let me ask a question about that, Teepoo, please. So I go to a co-packer, I make a deal. They say, yes, we'll package your hot sauce. It'll cost you, I don't know, $3 a bottle. And then I'm going to supply them with the label. They're going to put the label on for me with their machines, I guess, right? And then they're going to put them in the kind of boxes that I want them to put them in, right? I get to choose all these things.
Yeah, so co-packers, co-packers tend to be, because the equipment is often utilized for numerous brands, right? A co-packer is doing a bunch of brands for people. So they tend to be category specific. So we know of co-packers who basically handle sauces and dips, for example. And then there are co-packers who handle the snack category. So chips, cookies, things of that nature. And so they tend to be specialized because it ends up being, most co-packers don't have the capacity to basically make any product that you see across a grocery store. So what you'll have are those who specialize it, and then the bottling machine is going to be similarly. Yeah. So that's how that'll work. Yep.
And then, so they do all that. are you saying that the co-packer also will deliver the case to the grocer, or is that where a distributor has to come in?
No, so I think it could either be self-delivered. We've seen where there is self-delivery done by the brand themselves. Some co-packers will arrange for third-party transport. And then a distributor, I will say, so distributors in between your brand and the retailer. There are very large distributors in the natural food space that people may have heard of. UNFI, for example, is a very large one. You can engage with a distributor, and there are retailers that don't also require that as well. So I don't want folks to think that I've got to get my product to a distributor in order for it to get into the stores. There are numerous stores today who will deal direct with the brand. They will buy directly from the brand itself. Where distributors do have a benefit is that their sales agents, right, who are going out to the grocers, present basically a portfolio of products to the grocer. Your brand would be on one of those pages. And so the ability for you to scale is when you are with a distributor, and that's when you would be able to get into a number of stores. But I don't think that there is a real, I don't think it's a necessity as a startup to be thinking along the distributor channel.
We have 3 questions that have come in
Sure.
as we're talking about co-packers. The first is, what are the situations where you would not recommend a co-packer?
Not a situation where cost is an issue, for example. I mean, I think the reality is, I think that there aren't going to be many situations where I would not recommend a co-packer, but this is what I would say. A co-packer needs to meet your vision. And so I think in that way, your values and the things that are important about your product need to align with that co-packer. Okay. So if you are organic and you have certain quality attributes that are really important to you, you want that co-packer to be who's similarly situated, right, to you in that capacity. And so I do think fit is really important. And you also want to make sure that the co-packer you choose is going to meet your quantity needs. For example, sometimes there are minimums that you have to produce with a co-packer. And I think so I would say the overall fit with a co-packer is really important. And there are times where we have seen companies who started out with a co-packer and they brought their production in-house. And what that takes capital though, but you ultimately get control of your product that you would not have, ultimately with somebody else, for example. But I would say overall, co-packer relationships are extremely broad and they are really prevalent in the industry.
Here's another question. Is there a testing phase with co-packers where you can tweak your recipe to scale while maintaining desired quality?
Yes, 100%. Yes, I think we see that all the time with products that enter the market, into the co-packing arrangement. You're going to be working with if you just choose to go down the co-packing route, right? You are going to take something that you were developing possibly in a restaurant kitchen, sometimes in a home kitchen, and you are going to take it to a co-packer where they are going to say, okay, in order for us to scale this, even to scale it up a little bit, right, to get you into a production amount that can go to, say, 10 stores, it's going to be different than what you were doing. And so in that capacity, that's why I said fit is really important. Somebody who understands what you are trying to achieve is going to be really important. And that way you can absolutely 100%, you are going to test and tweak that product so that it meets your specification, so that you're happy with what ends up being in that bottle or whatever the packaging is before it goes to the store. Yes.
Got you. Can you talk, there's another question. Can you talk more about the specifics of making products out of our restaurant? What are the restrictions?
Sure. So this is going to be very specifically for New York City restaurants, okay? Because they are regulated by Department of Health and Mental Hygiene of New York City. And so there is an agreement between New York State Agriculture and Markets, which is the state regulatory body for grocers, manufacturers, wholesalers, there's an agreement between the two agencies that restaurants at a very small scale, and I want to say, and we may need to correct ourselves on this, I think so long as you're doing under $30,000 in retail sales of a consumer packaged good, and you are following safe manufacturing practices, you can make these products in your restaurant, and that will fall under Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, meaning New York State Ag will not be involved. However, once you exceed that amount, at that point, you fall under Department of, New York State Agriculture and Markets, at which point, most likely, you cannot have basically at that point, a functioning restaurant and a production facility simultaneously occurring. And at that point, you would most likely have to move you'd have to move the production of the CPG products out of the restaurant. Eventually it does conflict.
But you don't really need such a big space, because ultimately you're going to your co-packer with a recipe and they're making it, right?
Yeah, correct.
So you can use your restaurant just for testing and just for product.
Highly recommend that.
development.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I would absolutely use the assets that you have initially to be working on this product. And I would absolutely be using the your consumer base to be testing. I mean, these are items that's where, I'm excited about the restaurant client space, because food, you're familiar with it, you know how to cook in volume already, and you have a consumer base and you have a marketing presence through your restaurants. These are all aspects that really, really are worth their weight in gold compared to somebody else like me who's like starting my kitchen and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. If you're just a Joe Schmo who says, I want a ketchup company. And so, we're really excited about all the kind of head starts that clients have.
I'd like to trademark Joe Schmo's ketchup, by the way, Teepoo. I'm in. Let's talk about funding, how much everything costs.
So I want to say that capital requirements obviously are going to vary greatly. If you are starting, we are recommending that you start with a focused product line. We're not saying you have to start with one product, but we are certainly recommending that if it's going to be multiple, that they're thoughtful, that they engage with each other, that there's a story that you're telling, because for each item you are trying to get into the shelf, it is going to take shelf space of something else. And so a grocer is going to need a compelling story for why they should give you space for 4 items versus 1. And so regarding funding, we want to be clear upfront that the grocery industry is a pretty traditional industry. There are steps, there are processes, there are safety processes and certifications and requirements that grocery stores are just not going to cede in order to get your product on the shelf, meaning you will need to do them. And so in that capacity, we want folks to be aware that they're going to have to put up money for things like that. I wouldn't say that there's a single item that necessarily that's going to cost you $100,000. They all add up. Labeling will take a few $1,000s. Packaging is going to take a few $1,000s. Everything will ultimately add up. But in order to get you to the phase 1 that we talked about, where you basically are having a product that is going to be introducible to the market, and that means you are comfortable taking it to a merchant, which it can be like a Shark Tank moment, right? Where you are invited into a grocer and there's going to be a limited amount of time for you to show your product, to pitch your product. And so at that point, it could be upwards of $50,000 in order to get you there. And
But do people put on a show? Like people put on a slideshow and give them food products
you put on a tasting.
A tasting.
You will come to the grocer. You will have grocers have merchandising kitchens, for example. So if your product needs to be cooked, there will be stoves available for you. Often, I know for the FreshDirect merchandising kitchen, it resembles a home kitchen. In fact, it does not resemble a commercial kitchen. So it mimics really what the consumer is going to be doing. And you do a tasting and you bring your product. And if it's a salsa, you will bring a product, you will produce that product, and you will sit around and you will taste with the merchants.
What do you taste it with? If I'm bringing a salsa, do I bring chips? Do I cook some food that I think would go well with the salsa?
You bring everything that you need in order to show that your product is ready to go to market. And so
Okay.
whether that's chips, whether those are other ingredients, you bring everything you need to impress the client, impress the grocer that you are ready to go to market, that you have all the information that they require, and that you are ready to go. And at that point, we don't want to be, there should be no we don't knows anymore about our product. And so phase two, and that means when we are ramping up and your product is in, you are going to go to market, meaning grocery stores have selected you. They would like you to produce perhaps a pallet of your salsa, your hot sauce, your hummus.
Is that how they do it? Teepoo, by pallet? Is that how things get ordered?
Pallet is a lot of product can fit on a pallet. And so I've seen small brands start out with a number of cases being sold. And so, but in general, yes, eventually you will get to the thing where your items, God bless you, you're successful. Eventually your products will fit on a pallet and they will be delivered in a pallet. Yes. And so at that point, we believe that on average, in general, this is with a big asterisk, that around for $100,000, you can have a product that has been produced and it is saleable, meets regulatory requirements, and it is enough to get you into some initial grocery stores for circa 100.
I mean, when you think about how much we spend to open up a restaurant, 700, $1 million, $1 million plus, you're saying for $100,000, we can develop a product, get the labels together, find a co-packer, make a deal with them, go see the big shots at Whole Foods and get on the shelves.
Get on a limited number of shelves for that amount of money, correct. So again, as I will say, it's really important to think locally first, and that could include a Whole Foods. Whole Foods, for example, I believe there are 52 stores or something like that in the metropolitan New York area. They can select for a limited number of stores as well. So yes, so this could get you into the market and also start you bringing your presence, your marketing presence online on these products, which is a huge component of this, is the presence in front of the consumer. And so what we are hoping to see are brands that we have on this phone call and later who have strong presence with their restaurants are able to leverage that presence. And they are able to take that and say, hey, you love us? Check out what we're taking out to market. And you have a consumer base that's ready to go. And so that too is a really compelling thing for grocers, because while a restaurant may not have produced a CPG good prior, they have a reputation for knowing food and quality, and your brands mean something to the public already. And for what grocers are afraid of is an untested brand hitting the marketplace that sits on the shelf with no story. And so what we have here, everybody's got a story already. Everyone has a public facing presence through their marketing efforts. And so that to grocers is really compelling. You're out and about already. You're doing interviews, you're doing press, you have social media. All of these things are the things that folks who haven't done it before, it's really hard to learn how to do it and get it going. And so in that capacity, I think grocers in general are going to be really happy to see such brands that we have on the phone today come forward.
Let's talk about the big raise, when we have to raise the $1 million. When does that happen? Like, what's going on in our business where we have to raise $1 million?
So when a capital, and obviously this goes, if you have the cash to self-fund yourself, then by all means, you can do that. However, there comes a point with the success of a brand where either a Whole Foods says, let's go bigger, or you are selling more in the market than you are currently making. Your co-packer You may be exceeding their maximums, for example, even, and you need to switch, and you start contemplating a larger co-packer, or you start contemplating your own facility. So FDA certified facility, looks like a commercial kitchen, your own personnel. And so at that point, when you are growing and you are starting to scale, and this means possibly leaving a regional, no longer being a regional product and starting to sell nationwide, or you've been selling nationwide the whole time via Gold Belly or your own website. At that point, it's not, you may face capital constraints in order to grow. And so in order to facilitate, and this is no different than those of you who've expanded your groups by adding new restaurants and things of that nature, at times you may need it. And if you are going to take on things like personnel and real estate, or a larger co-packer, or greater minimums, for example, in producing your product, that could take capital. And so at that point, we're happy to help you think about how to raise that money. What is that money? Where is that money coming from? Is it a friends and family? There are venture capital firms that do fund food products. The food space is huge. Alternative proteins for the last 7 years were funded to great amounts. Things like Impossible and stuff like that we see in the marketplace. And so at that point, it's time for a discussion. And I would say this is usually a high quality problem. This means something good is happening in your brand, that there is demand, that you need to grow, and you may need some funding to do that, but that generally means you're a success.
Let's talk about the regulatory requirements.
Yep. So CPGs are definitely different than restaurants. And so restaurants, and this is pretty much across the board, regardless of state, they're regulated by their local authorities, meaning at the city level. Sometimes there's a state component, but in general, restaurants, highly local. CPGs are pretty much regulated at the state level. And for us, that's New York State Agriculture and Markets, and at the federal level at the FDA. And so basically, if you are selling a product that is made in a facility that is going across state lines or through the internet, and it's being distributed through third-party carriers such as UPS and FedEx and all of that stuff, it is going to be an FDA facility, meaning it is registered with the FDA. It has to follow what are known as good manufacturing practices. It has to have all the requirements of the 2011 Food Safety Modernization Act, which basically updated the food code. And so that includes things such as preventive control plans. So you may have heard of HACCP plans, which are hazardous access critical points. HACCP plans, there's things that regulate foreign suppliers. So if you are interested in, for example, importing a product that you are making, there are rules regarding that. Food defense came out of 9/11, and that there's actually plans in place for how do you prevent contamination, intentional contamination of your food products, and then also the transport of your products as well. And so I would say that these are not onerous, but they are required. And the industry is well aware of them. Making them is really important. And that's why you tend to see co-packers tend to focus on an area, because it does require food safety plans about how they're manufacturing each of their products. And so that's why you tend to see folks specialize in salsas and dips, and then somebody else is doing the chips and all of that. And so that is the regulations. If you start dealing in meat products, the USDA is the regulator for meat products in the United States. And so they too can be involved. And that could be the inspection of your labels, and that could be also visiting the facility at which your products are made.
Okay.
Like I said, these regulations, you just work through, I've dealt with them for years. You just work through them, you have to deal with them, and you put the plans in place that basically tackle them, and then you move on, really.
Let's talk about some of the resources that are out there for our clients to help them.
Yes. So this industry is gigantic, hundreds of billions of dollars a year. this industry is lucrative, as we started out at the beginning showing you. So with that, there are tons of resources that are out there to support new food companies. In addition to us, there are organizations that are designed to support small scale food processing. And here I'm just focusing on New York, but there are two I've listed right here, the Association of Food Processors of New York and the New York Small Scale Food Processors Association. And so these are organizations that not only advocate at the government level for regulations that tend to be favorable to their clients, but these are also ones who can put you in touch, networking, where you can find others who are similarly situated to you. You can find co-packers, you can find others who are suppliers of product and things of that nature. So associations are a great resource. They're no different than the restaurant trade, the restaurant industries. And then there's the government. New York State is very supportive of New York producers. And so between the city and up in the rural areas, there are tons of programs and money and grants and tax incentives for people who make New York products, hire New York workers, have New York facilities, for folks to explore all of the aid and assistance that the government has. I've just listed two, but New York State has Empire State Development, which is the economic funding arm of New York State. And then New York City has the Economic Development Corporation, which some of you may know. It developed the thing out on Essex Street Market, for example, was developed by New York City EDC. And those vendors that you see there were chosen by people who work at the EDC. And so there's great support from the government for new companies. Academic, Cornell Center of Excellence is a food-focused aspect of Cornell University that is open to food companies. They have a venture arm that gives grants and money to people. They have education. They have training constantly. I watched one yesterday about a retired person from Wegmans, a former merchant of Wegmans, who was explaining how to get on their shelves yesterday. And so there are tons of resources from the Cornell Center of Excellence that they have basically, they put a stake in the ground that they wanted New York State to have a really great resource that rivaled anything in the world for New York companies. And so they're excellent. And then on the business side, there are incubators and venture capital and other people who provide money. Accelerators are where you can pitch and they will give you access to talent, people who know how to put products on the shelves. They will also give money. And so what I listed there for you are a few accelerators and VC funds who are known to play in the food space very aggressively on an annual basis all the time, giving anywhere from $25,000 up to $1 million plus to food companies on a regular basis. And I also included a few that are connected to some really large companies. So Chobani started one that is in New York that has an incubator for new companies. And they provide their knowledge of being one of the largest, if not the largest yogurt seller in America right now, to budding new companies. And Mondelez has started what is known as Snack Futures, which is also their VC arm, and PepsiCo has started PepsiCo Ventures, which is also provides money to companies. And I will say, if you've ever sought out any type of venture capital funding or anything like that, there does need to be, I would say, presence in the marketplace, knowledge, and I think certain aspects that we would certainly help you in that journey regarding funding that is going to be slightly more sophisticated than definitely friends and family, but can be absolutely a key resource for you as your brand grows.
Fantastic. Let's go to the last thing. So this is what we're going to do. This is what we can do for you. We've spoken to probably a dozen clients so far in this kind of pre-opening period. And what we have found is that people want to be able to come to us and say, here's my product, get me on the shelves. without having to do too much work. So Teepoo, you want to go through the list of things that we can do for people?
Yeah. So broadly speaking, what we want to do for you and where we bring value is that we can provide guidance from concept to exit. And what I mean by exit is I mean a sale of your brand. And so that to us is going to be what we would like to do, where we partner with you and where we're really involved in helping you grow this brand in every aspect. And so from concept, that would be business development, including plans, costing, thinking through suppliers, thinking through packaging, thinking through co-packing. And then once those things have been identified, it's helping you facilitate those relationships with industry, retailers, distributors, and through that network that we have of helping you meet the right people to expedite how your product enters the marketplace. And then from there, obviously, within all of this new business, there's the legal assistance and guidance that we can provide regarding any and all agreements that you have. HR issues, your IP, someone was talking about the proprietary needs of the product and the brand. So all of that, trademarking, copyright, tech, so websites, service agreements, all of that, and your real estate needs if you have that. And then post-launch, you have a functioning company. That functioning company is going to act where it's going to have governance. Sometimes as you grow, you will include board of directors. You will have capital expansion. And so through the life of your organization and through the life of your products, and as you add them, and when you change manufacturers, you add people, you lose people, all of that, very similar to what you're doing in your restaurant, but in a different industry that is run differently with a different set of rules. We're here to guide you through that entire thing.
Yeah, and it's like half legal, half business. The reason why Teepoo was so interesting to me, other than him being a very interesting person, is that he has this amazing experience that I just didn't know anyone else who had. He has been through it. He understands restaurants. He understands the CPG industry. He understands the grocery business. So it's thrilling to us to get started with him. And we really do want to partner with our clients in this one. You know, I'm intimately involved with most of your businesses, and I consider myself a partner, even though it's not on paper. This is different. Here, we actually want to partner with you and get involved in your business. And we'll talk about how we can do that. All you have to do is call me or call Teepoo. Let us know that you have a product that you're interested in putting on the shelves, and we'll set up a meeting with you. But now we have some other questions. So
Sure.
now's the time to ask any question you want. I have a couple. One is from Alicia Guevara from Mecklenburgs. And I say her name because she said, just putting this out there, but as a launch pad for all your clients who are looking to make a product, Mecklenburgs would be interested in selling it at our locations. They're the coolest stores, by the way. Depends on the product. Still would be cool to be able to sell more local small brands. Thank you, Alicia. That's incredible. What resources are available to find co-packers other than us? Teepoo.
Yeah, so back to that last slide, and this obviously this deck will be circulated and will be put on the Helbraun Levey website. Those associations will provide a list of co-packers. In addition, I would recommend visiting, if you're in New York, Cornell Center of Excellence is a great place to stop because they have a huge resource list of co-packers and the specialty that those co-packers, work in.
You have any another question from Julie? Do you have any additional advice or information on frozen products?
So the frozen space is also growing. I would say that I would not deter anybody from entering the frozen space. I would say that there's just something, when you think about frozen products, cold chain is exceptionally important, and the transportation of these products properly at the temperatures that they need to be. For example, full fat ice cream tends to need about -20 degrees Fahrenheit for it to really be hard. That's the most important aspect. I would say that frozen is a tight category, meaning it has some of the least space in the grocery sector, but that's not to deter. I think there's a healthy area ripe for reinvention that has still not been tapped, because I think people tend to shy away because of the cold chain issues.
Thank you. Here's another question. Can you also talk about the need or not for distributors and the gross margin flow? Example, selling wholesale to a distributor who then sells it to the end retailer. Also, maybe touch on typical returns and or scrap policies.
Yeah, so I think yes, so each layer that you add between yourself and ultimately the consumer who purchases your product, they will require their cut. And so retailers are going to be looking for around 40. You yourself are going to be looking for around 40. And so adding a distributor is going to place margin pressure on you 100%. That is a true statement. The exchange for that margin pressure is going to be a larger network that distributor can possibly get you into. And this is not uncommon, where brands that finally make their way into Walmart have insane margin pressure because of the demand of what Walmart wants to pay for the product and how much they want their customers to pay for it, which, as we all know, Walmart is a value retailer and they want their customers to pay as little as possible. And so in that capacity, there are distributors that are huge, such as UNFI, and then there are specialty ones who focus on, say, Italian products, gourmet products. I would never say no to considering them, but I would say that there are many opportunities today in 2023, different from previous years, where you have more opportunity to get your product to somebody without necessarily needing a distributor.
Excellent. Here's another one. I'm located in Hudson, New York, and run a restaurant called Quinny's. I've heard about Quinny's from Yves DeReef. Hi, Quinn. When launching a product, is it wise to keep the same name as your business? And by that, she means the same name as the restaurant.
So yeah, I mean, so I'm going to get legal for a second. I would say that there is huge value in your brand name. And to leverage that into the marketplace is one of the things that we view as a major advantage for the clients on this phone call. Like, to me, this is a no-brainer. And so to choose a brand that would, say, be completely unrelated to your restaurant just puts you at a slight disadvantage again, because it's something that's unknown. Whereas folks know you already from the legal background, corporate structure, the actual LLC, all of that stuff can work through. That's different. But that absolute value in taking a beloved brand name and launching it into that space.
Great answer. Good question too. Another question. What do you feel is the most common misconception about the CPG market?
That you have to get big and you gotta do it like on a huge scale, and that it's going to cost you a lot of money. I think that there are ways. I think that is what folks think about when they think about CPG, because I think the word CPG, people tend to think of things like Unilever and Hershey's and all of that. But let's not forget, when we went way back to the beginning of the deck, there were all those brands started out really small. Small brands become big. And I think that's what I want folks to take a positive, note away from this, is that this is really doable. We're here because we fully believe in this client base and your capacity to do this. And I think it's really important I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions, is that I can't do it. What you saw are folks who did it and did it really successfully. And so I don't think this was supposed to be motivating. This is supposed to be to get you pumped, get you excited, to help you, diversify those revenue streams, and for you to, because I understand the difficulties of running, butts in seat dining. It's difficult. And so to help you create another stream of revenue that also provides you not just cash, but satisfaction, That's what we're looking for. And I think that's the biggest misconception is folks think they can't do it.
Amen. I have another question for you. I have an idea for not only a product that we do very well, that does very well selling at our restaurants, but for the actual packaging, which I have not seen in the markets. Will a co-packer work with the client to develop the packaging that does not yet exist in the market? Or will I need to first develop the package and then go to the co-packer and see if they can do it?
So I think, yes, you can work with a co-packer. Package manufacturing is no different than bottle manufacturing, right? These are dies and machines that folks are using to make packaging. And so with that, if you have a unique design, is what I'm hearing, it's absolutely worth the discussion to see about the viability of that, 100%.
Okay. I think we're done with our questions. If no one has any other questions, thank you all for coming. We love you all and we love seeing you. If you have any questions for us, teepoo.riaz@helbraunlevey.com. I'm David at helbraunlevey.com. You can call us, whatever it takes. But we're into this. Our clients are already lining up, and we want to talk to you. So give us a call. Thank you, Teepoo. That was terrific. Really, really well done.
I appreciate the time and I look forward to working with you guys. I really do.
Okay. Thank you, Alex, on the ones and twos. Appreciate you running this for us from the back. And thanks, everyone. We'll see you soon.